potatoes you were talking about?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, but it don't come to me right now.
No. The feathers on the chicken?
Oh yes, that was uh, Ben Farmer, Patsy. Who else was there? But they were gonna get dinner for themselves. I was downtown, went back to the mill, in the camp, and they they had everything cooked, but they had gone to bootleggers for. They started cooking, and they were both three of them. There were three, and I don't remember who the other was. But gassed up pretty well by that time, and they had the chicken were in the pot, and the feet were sticking up, and the feathers were floating in it, and the feathers were half peeled. So, oh, they were having the greatest time ever. Yeah.
How
Uh,
long? I'm sorry. How long did the train run on Beaver Island? You said there was a rail.
it, I think it was about 12 miles.
Okay.
It's up in the middle of the island where the timber grew. And they went up one way and back down. They didn't turn around or anything. And they'd pull maybe 3 or 4 cars, load the log down to the mill where the marina is down here now. And dump them off, go back, get some more. They employed up to 40 men with that mill here, so it was great for the island, all right. But there wasn't anything else. Well, there's fishing, but not right.
I
Excuse
got
me.
it. I'll get
That,
You mentioned that it was only men who worked at the logging, at the mill and
you're right.
everything. What were the roles of women on the island while you were growing up?
Well, pretty near everybody had a garden, like in the spring of the year, And the ones that lived on the farm, the women, then all the taking care of the cattle, to feed them while the men were out in the wood. So they were employed with no money.
When did you start working on the Emerald Isle and as a captain?
I was, what, 40? I probably when I went. But I did fish with the fishermen around there and fish boats. Not of my own, but I fished with them. And then I worked on the inland seal. They haul ore from Dakota to Indiana Harbor. I worked there for a couple of years during the summer, which was good paid. Then they had lots of money. And I think one time there was 29 or 30 sailors worked every year on the boats. I didn't work only a few years. Some of them stayed on all the time.
Do you have any stories of when you would fish with the other fishermen?
No, I was just a worker then. I don't think I probably have them. I'll think of later, but that comes to me right now. I don't remember.
Who did you work for? Do you remember?
Yeah, I worked for Mike Cull was the name of the fellow owned a boat, a nice fish boat. And I worked for people by the name of Gallagher. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with fishing or not, but when you fish either with ponets, they're along the shore, they drive stakes down, put nets on, and you pull pull the net up and get the fish out of it. Then the other ones that work on a fish boat that's built for it to deal in bad weather and stuff. You pull the nets aboard the boat and duck the fish out and set them back again. Just to return them. And sometimes you get, 2,000 pounds of fish. Sometimes 1,500, you know. They vary sometimes a year. But there used to be about 10 boats out there at one time. And some were what they call ponded fishing, where you drive the sticks and close to the shore. And there's they call a lead, is a net that they run into about 6 feet of water and out to what they call a pot. And the fish comes up to this, and there's no place to go. They go this way, and they get in the pot, and then you go and scoop them out. And it's nothing to catch 2,000 pounds of fish in the net. Of course, they don't do it anymore. There's no more fishing like that. And then they take them in, dress them, and sell them. Ship them on the mail boat Charleway. And they distribute them different places. But this was one of the greatest places in the United States for fish at one time. They finally fished them out.
Actually, what is your favorite childhood memory?
My what?
Your favorite memory from your childhood?
That'd be a hard one.
Do you have any fond memories, not just from your childhood, just from living on the island?
Well,
Favorite places to go?
about the only thing I left here and I never figured and come back. The kids said you're going back, so I said okay, and they went and got the house here built and sold the house in Harloway. How long were we over there, Pam?
About 20 years.
20 years. And then I, in the back car, started back in the aisle. But we lived, I don't know how to describe it. This house was on, were you out the country at all? How far out you go?
I've been all the way around the
Oh,
island.
did you? Oh, gosh. Well, the little house, that house is burned down. There's another house there my sister-in-law lives in. And that's right in Sand Bay. There's a lot of houses along there. But this was back between the river and the lake. It was built in there.
You know, there are probably two little stories that you might want to tell about farming. One is tell them about your trip over to High Island. You were about 15,
Oh,
and you went with, I can't remember, Brown?
huh?
Who did you go over there to High Island with?
What was his name?
Wasn't it Brown?
Yeah, I believe his name was Brown. The Israelites came from Ben Harbor. You know about the Israelites. And they went to High Island and started farming over there. But they didn't last too long. And they left there, and then there was a couple of fellows tried to farm over there, but it's all sand. You couldn't go disturbing them even. And went over. My dad had a hay bale, and this fellow wanted him to go to High Island to bale hay. He bought from the Israelites. And the Israelites lived down in
Benton Harbor? Benton Harbor?
Ben Harbor, yeah. and I don't know if there is any more Israelites or not, but there was 100 of them over there at one time. And they lived there and they built a bakery for themselves. They're very thrifty people. And they farmed and they had a boat. They'd bring the produce up here, bring it to Charleway, and they really had a big, it'd been the harbor, they had a big farm, and they'd even take it down there and sell it. And they were here for, God, I don't know, 20 years, I guess. And my dad had a hay baler, and this fellow, after the Israelites left, he went down there and cut the hay. But he couldn't get it up here, whatever he cut it down there for, unless in bales. And my dad had a hay baler, and it used to put it in bales about so big, and compress it, and tie it with a wire. And another guy and I was about 14, I guess, and he wanted to bale the hay so he could move it off there. And my dad wouldn't let the hay baler go unless I or my brother went with it. So we were down, I was down there for a week with another young guy from the island here. We took an armful of hay and threw it down in the barn, that's where we slept. But they had big ovens and cooking utensils of all kinds. They really lived good. So we used their stuff. They weren't supposed to, but we used their stuff. But we down there after a week's time, boy, I never so hungry in my life. I wasn't that good of a cook myself.
And the Indians brought you back, didn't they?
Yeah. The Indians took us out the west side of the island and said, you'll have to jump in the lake now. We get in about 5 feet of water. That's Joe. And get into 5 feet of water hello, Joe. How are you?
Just getting interviewed.
Oh, okay.
Come on in, you can help me.
No, thanks. That thing at the museum is Thursday at 8 o'clock in the evening. At
Which?
Montai Logging over on Garden Island.
Yeah.
I gotta be gone, but I don't know if Dad would want to see that.
Oh, maybe I'll take them then. Okay.
Yeah, I gotta stay in Charleway right now.
Okay.
I can't.
All right, thanks for letting me know.
We'll see you later.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. That's been fun.
The other thing is about the thrasher. That was a big thing for the island when they got their first thrashing machine.
Oh, yeah. We used to have a fellow that he was German that came right from Germany, and he was an excellent mechanic and anything, blacksmith, anything. And so we had no thrasher on the island, and they had a meeting one time here, and we all get it up, and we had about, I think all we could put in $25, something like that, a piece, and then we bought this thrasher and got it back to the island there. And we thought that was a really big investment, you know.
You had even the doctor here.
Yeah, Dr. Palmer, he was a doctor here. He put in $25. Everybody thought he was crazy, but anyway, he helped us a lot, because the money was hard to get then, you know. I think we had a comp about $300, something like that, to buy it. And then we got it over here, and whoever bought it went to sea. They didn't provide power for it. And all they had here was horses and to power it. And it didn't have what they call a power part of the tire. So then we had to get a gasoline engine run. Now we got divided every farmer got his thrashing done. And the wind was put on a big meal. One that tried to outdo the other, boy. By the time you're done thrashing, you were too full to do anything.
Did you work a lot with the Indians here on the island, or what
I
kind of
never worked
relations?
much with them. I've been one in a camp, lumber camp out then or something like that, but I knew most all of them. You know, they're all happy-go-lucky guys, holler at you and wave at you. They're really nice people.
You did talk about one fellow who was an Indian up on the west side camp, and remember the rabbits that you talked about him snaring?
Oh yeah, Eddie Birch, he was an Indian. And that was her grandfather had a camp up at French Bay on the southwest side there. So they couldn't get a crew one time. I was about 15, I guess. And he, I was downtown with my dad. He asked me if I wanted to go to camp, and he ended up being my father-in-law. So I went up to the camp there, and there was 6, if I remember right, men in the camp. And this Indian is called Eddie Birch. And he was, like the Indians are, they're famous for trapping, you know. And rabbits were so thick on the island, any place, if you were here, now they'd be 6 or 8 in the yard out here. He set some snares that's made out of copper wire. You make a loop in the copper wire, and in the winter time, these rabbits run on the same trail. So they run into this loop and hang themselves. And he knew just how to do that. So he put out so many snares, we call them, and caught so many rabbits that he piled them up as cordwood. He didn't, well, across this room anyway, from down the ground to 6 feet high. And in the weekend when things were kind of tough for people to get food and money and stuff, he'd take them down, give them to anybody who wanted rabbits. God, everybody was full of rabbits that time spring. And they wouldn't think it was a rabbit. Yeah, they were so thick, you could look out at the window there and there'd be 10 rabbits out there. Then they died off after that. Some hunted and some died. But he was a famous trapper. He did make a loop in the winter time. Rabbits, you might not be familiar with this, they have followed a track. Well, maybe 5 or 10 rabbits will go down this track. They don't run off here. When the snow comes, they stay in the track. And they find tough to eat along the way. And so he was famous for trapping. And we ate a lot of that camp too. Yeah, that was the main food were meat. I don't imagine you girls ever had rabbit eat.
I have.
Have you?
Not me. One last question, if that's all right.
Sure.
Is there anything about the island that has changed or disappeared since you were growing up that you wish was still around? Or anything about the way of life or particular places on the island?
Oh yeah. You could come downtown from the country if you lived in the country, and come downtown, and no matter what house you pass, there'd be somebody say, "Come on in, have a cup of coffee or have something to eat." So that's all changed, because you know we're not they're strangers. They don't know us, we don't know them. So that's one big change. And of course, it was all horse and buggy in my day, and now it's all automobile. But I suppose that's the most means of traffic. And the roads, we had roads you couldn't drive a car on. You had to have a horse or walk. And I don't know if they're You knew everybody by their first name. And if a stranger came in the boat, somebody'd come and tell you who they were, what their name was.
Did you get to know a lot of the people who would visit in the summertime when you were the captain of the?
Oh yeah, I knew everybody that came to the island. Who left the island? Yeah.
Well, and there weren't restaurants. I remember you'd just haul them home and Mom would
Oh
feed some
sure.
people. They'd get here and there was no place for them to eat.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's what, like the Bovies, that they started seeing you when they first came here. They got off the boat and there was no place to eat, so Dad just brought them and the Allens
Yeah.
up and, just put a couple more plates around the table. But we had cows and lots of meat.
Oh yeah. Nobody ever went hungry on the island, I don't think. Except if anybody knew that somebody didn't have anything to eat, they'd bring them food. Everybody would bring food.
It's really nice.
And that was the other thing that you were saying. You had a grandmother that was married to an uncle.
Yeah.
That's the way that, and you used
My
to have kids come in and your mother would take them in too if something happened to a...
Oh sure. Sure, we had kids that went to school. There was a little schoolhouse up where you turned to Sand Bay. It's about 5 miles out here. That's where I first went to school. And there was other people who lived in the way out in the woods, and I have a little farmer come, and the kids that go to school, they come there with and say, "Oh, winter, go to school from there."
Was that the Sunnyside School?
No,
Or was it
the one
Roosevelt?
that's up further than
Roosevelt.
Roosevelt?
Greentown.
Or Greentown.
So we used to call it Greentown. Yeah, we had as many as 3 or 4 stay at our place all winter. Go to school with us guys.
Was that common
Oh
for
yeah.
the rural schools to have kids from even further out staying
Oh
in the
sure.
houses?
And same with when I was talking about your grandmother and your uncle. They had a way of sort of taking care of people. There weren't any social services, it sounds like, in those days, and so people would get together and live together, like your grandmother and your uncle.
Oh yeah.
She didn't have a husband.
Right.
Was he a bachelor?
Yeah, he was a bachelor. Oh, we had more bachelors than other one. They women for any woman with any sense would run and get off the island. And a lot of the girls went to nursing school. Went to Grand Rapids, Chicago. And most of the places, the cities, like Detroit or Chicago and the likes, you'd have some relatives there, and if you wanted, they'd get you a job, or you could go and live with them. You had a place to go, and you left here. Which a lot of them did stay with their relatives.
I just thought of something else. What were or you still have the homecoming dinners. Do you remember when that first got started? The August dinner?
Oh, that would be before my time, I guess. That's possible.
That they started, but you
Yeah.
remember
Right,
them
the
in
Oh,
the
I
remember-
remember. Yeah, I remember that people would come here a couple of days before, and they'd say with relatives, and I don't know how many people would come. I never did count, but there was a lot of them anyway, and everybody's relatives would come, and they'd just move in with their relatives, and say they're ready to go home. Yeah.
You used to also talk about the end of the boating season when all the men would get off the freighters.
Oh yeah.
and come back, and they were flush with money.
Yeah, we did 30 or 40 men from the island there that worked on the freighters all summer, and their pockets were bulging with money. They couldn't spend it, you know. And they come home and they had a raffle. Here they'd raffle stuff off, and them fellas would throw money away like it was going out of style, you know. They just take a handful out and throw it down, get the ticket, and they never even looked to see if they won something. Yeah, we had a lot of sailors here. One time there were 26 fellows from this little island was sailing. It was a good way to make money, you know. And a lot of them moved to Chicago, Detroit, worked in car factories. They had no education, but they could do that kind of manual labor, you know.
Was that, did a lot of men become sailors sort of after the fishing industry declined a lot?
Oh yeah, and during it too. There one doing he liked to get on a fishing boat. The smell was so alone, you know. So they would head off to sail. And we had a lot of captains at sailboats on the lake.
Do you have any more questions?
I don't.
Well, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for your
Well,
time.
I hope you got the information you
Oh,
wanted.
we got so much excellent stuff. Thank you very much.
I'm just going to show you a